As I discussed with you in a previous video, Donald Trump is now publicly targeting even Fox News for criminal investigation into so-called election fraud, simply because they and other reputable pollsters acknowledge some facts. Number one, Trump is very unpopular. And number two, his first 100 days back in office have also been very unpopular, which means he's really going to hate what I'm about to show you, which is an entire Fox News segment dedicated to exploring why Trump is, quote, in very bad shape. Yikes. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. All right, friends, it's always fun when Fox News will occasionally observe reality and provide some critical coverage of Donald Trump. Now, they love him because their viewers love Trump, and they want to hold on to their viewer base, their viewer share. They don't want to lose their viewers to OAN or Newsmax, so they try to be as loyal to Trump as humanly possible. But occasionally, Fox will be critical of Trump or acknowledge facts which are critical of Trump. And so this is kind of bold what they're doing here, an entire segment to discussing why Trump is underwater. We're going to play this in its entirety because it's great. It's great to see Fox struggle to cope with this, just as it's great to see Trump struggle to cope with this, and we'll unpack it together.
He came into office promising to secure the border and lower prices for Americans. But as President Trump gets set to mark 100 days in office on Wednesday, a new Fox News poll finds voters delivering a mixed verdict on his handling of those key issues so far. The president getting his best marks on border security, with 55% approving of the job he's doing. But when it comes to the economy, a mere 38% approve of his performance, and just 33% approve of his handling of inflation and tariffs. For more, I'm joined by Fox News contributor Karl Rove. He served as a senior advisor to President George W. Bush. So welcome, Karl. What are the numbers, the polls telling us about President Trump's standing after 100 days?
Well, he's off to a good start only on one issue, and that is border security, where his approval rating is 11 points ahead of his overall approval rating. He gets reasonably good marks on immigration and handling of deportations, but even those he's upside down on. But you're right, Paul, when it gets to the economy, he is in very bad shape. And it's not only that he's in the short term in bad shape, there's also evidence in the poll that no matter, even if he gets his way on certain things like tariffs, that he's not good in the long run. Take a look at this. Trump policies. Today, will it help the economy? 32% say yes. Will it hurt the economy, his policies? 54% say no, 10% no difference. In the long run, will it help the country? 40%. In the long run, will it hurt the country? 51%. So there's some very deep-seated skepticism among ordinary Americans about the effect of the economy, the president's economic policies, both in the short run and the long run.
Well, that's really...
So let's stop right there. Again, Karl Rove, who is an infamous conservative strategist. He did work for President Bush. In the lead up to the MAGA movement, Karl Rove was kind of seen like a Steve Bannon figure, like this influential puppet master and advisor. He was parodied and lampooned on Family Guy and I believe The Simpsons, as well as almost like an Emperor Palpatine, Machiavellian, satanic figure. This guy is as conservative as it gets, and he has tried to support Trump, and he has tried to offer Trump productive advice from his Fox News analysis seat, right, in the heart of friendly territory, because he wants Trump to succeed. And so for him to pull out the whiteboard and talk about this is brutal. And he also wrote an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal recently about America's Trump fatigue. He would be using much more vociferous language if all of this had been occurring under a Democrat. But it's pretty brutal when you think about it, that even if Trump gets these deals, the fact of the matter is, because the effects, best case scenario, won't be seen for years, even the long-term polling is against Trump on this. And imagine that a Democratic president comes into office again. Just imagine, it's not true, but just imagine that Trump is right on tariffs and Trump gets the outcome he wants on tariffs. But imagine he's well out of office by the time those benefits accrue, and it happens under a Democratic president, and a Democratic president does what Republican presidents typically do, which is try to take credit for shit that happened before them. That would be hilarious. So he's right. I mean, at least according to the polling, Trump is screwed on tariffs no matter what. Pretty bad.
Really startling, Karl, because he was elected because people had more confidence in his ability to help the economy and lower prices than they did in Kamala Harris. So to what do you attribute that new skepticism or real concern about the economy?
Well, I have a slightly different view. I agree with you that they voted for him because they felt better, in my opinion, about they looked at the last 4 years under Biden Harris and said not good, and they looked at and remembered the 4 years under President Trump and said those were a lot better. I think this was a hope. I don't think it was based upon a explicit understanding of what he was going to do. They just hoped that he would do better on inflation and jobs and economic growth. And then when he came in, just the sort of chaos and the inability of the administration to explain what they're doing, I think has hurt them very much. And it's also hurt them, frankly, even on the things that they're getting right. Think about border security. 55% of the American people approve of his handling of border security. And it's true. Go to the border. The flows across the border have greatly diminished and are completely manageable. He has yet to go to the border and explain to the American people what he did. And I think the same thing applies to the economic policies. All they know is there's tariffs and there's talks about taxes and blah, 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 blah. And it doesn't seem to be making things better when they look at the tangible things of going to the grocery store, filling up their car, and looking at the stock market returns of the 61% of American people who own shares in the markets.
Yeah, but isn't it a little early to really expect to see prices falling? I mean, you know, we've had 2%, we had 3% inflation when he took over. So that was still a problem.
Right.
I guess why isn't he getting a bigger honeymoon? Do you think it's on the economic front and on the pricing front? Is it because of the tariffs, which are kind of frightening people, leading to uncertainty about whether business will invest? Are the tariffs the problem?
Well, I think the tariffs are a big problem because people instinctively understand it is a tax and that it's going to be a tax on them that they have to pay when they, Vietnam. Can you imagine 46% tariff on Vietnam, where one of the principal things they supply us is affordable school clothes? Can you imagine what would happen when millions of American families go back to outfit the kids for a new school year at the end of the summer and find themselves paying 40 and 50% more for the things that they bought a year before and thought were too expensive to begin with? So yes, I think as part of it is what he's talking about, but the other part of it is what he's not talking about. He's not talking about, here's what I'm doing to reduce, to make our economy stronger and to reduce the burdens on our economy. For example, the deregulatory effort, $1.9 trillion of new regulatory burden imposed in just 4 years under Joe Biden. It was $870 billion of new regulatory burden on the economy in 8 years under Barack Obama. Trump is going to go in and undo a lot of that burden, but he's not out there explaining to the American people, I'm making it easier for American companies, American businesses, and you to get along with less government red tape and regulation taking money out of your pocket.
Yeah. So again, I will say, like, a good piece of advice I think Karl Rove offered, and it would be in line with Donald Trump to do this, and I'm also surprised that he hasn't done this, is given that the economy and immigration were the two biggest elements of Trump's path back to the White House. He's underwater on both, particularly the economy. Why wouldn't he try to take credit for what's going on at the southern border now? Why wouldn't he try to tout the numbers that his border patrol has been releasing? I mean, the pageantry of it, the spectacle. It's stunning that he hasn't done that, especially as his polling continues to crater. He might be able to resuscitate some of his failing polling on this. Again, it is shocking that given how, in theory, depending on the polling question, the American people do support mass deportations, that they do support them lawfully and humanely, and they don't support deporting undocumented immigrants who have been here and have been, in their eyes, productive and in their eyes contributing to society. They want violent offenders to be particularly targeted. You would think, right, that Trump would have fertile ground there, but because of his just lawless, authoritarian, cruel deportations, particularly of the high-profile case of Kilmar Abrego Garcia, Trump is floundering even there as well. So I think that's great advice from Karl Rove, if you wanted Trump to succeed, which I don't, for Trump to go to the southern border. Since he sucks at governing and is really, really good at spectacle, why is he not doing that? But again, I'll also point out regarding the end there, the American economy was doing pretty well under President Biden, certainly compared to what's going on under Donald Trump. And small business startups were at extraordinary highs under President Biden. So this idea that, Donald Trump is making it easier for you and your others to operate in a business environment. I'd like to see evidence of that, because so far I have not seen any. Since we mentioned Fox News, again, and I imagine this segment is not going to help their standing with Trump, who is publicly targeting them for investigation, on Truth Social, I also want to look at some other brutal headlines from conservative outlets like the New York Post. President Trump battered by brutal polls that show his approval sinking, including one revealing the lowest ratings since the Second World War. Oof, this again comes from the New York Post, which Piers Morgan writes for. That's how conservative it is. Trump is facing a dramatic drop in his approval, according to 5 new polls released Sunday, including one that shows he has the lowest ratings for a new presidential term since World War II. Surveys from CBS, ABC and the Washington Post, NBC, CNN, and the New York Times all show Trump standing in the public slipping significantly since he started announcing tariffs on all of America's biggest trading partners. Trump has tried to reassure the public that the tariff onslaught will lead to Americans paying lower income taxes and be a boon for manufacturing jobs. Quote, when tariffs cut in, many people's income taxes will be substantially reduced, maybe even completely eliminated, Trump teased on Truth Social Sunday. Quote, focus will be on people making less than $200,000 a year. Also, massive numbers of jobs are already being created, with new plants and factories currently being built or planned. It will be a bonanza. Despite the dour polling news, Trump is still pulling higher marks in Democrats in key areas and maintains support of nearly 90% among Republicans. And just as a sidebar, I will acknowledge, as a Democrat, we've got our issues. And yes, we are still underwater. Now, the congressional ballot, the generic ballot is looking better for us in that right now, if the elections were held today, the midterm elections, Democrats would retake the House, if not the Senate, because people are pissed off at Republican governance. But it is true that Democrats have to get their shit together. And again, it goes into, things that we've talked about in previous videos, so I don't really see the need to regurgitate it again. But the New York Post is commenting on this. The New York Post has a pretty brutal headline for Trump. That's going to set him off. The National Review, another reputable conservative publication alongside the Washington Post, they're also reporting pretty negatively on this. On today's edition of The Editors, Rich is joined by Phil, MBD, and Ramesh for a discussion about Trump's significant approval ratings drop. Quote, we have a bunch of new Trump polls and it's not looking great, Rich Lowry says. Quote, his job approval rating has taken a step down pretty much everywhere. Michael agrees and says, quote, he's coming down from the highest of highs, even for him, which is early in his second term. He was more popular than ever. I think there was relief to be out from under Biden and the conspiracy to hide his senility and have someone who is at least active again and someone who is associated with a strong economy. End quote. Unfortunately for Trump, his use of the tariff stick is causing unease in the markets. And Michael thinks, quote, there just hasn't been the forethought here, and I think the public is holding him accountable. Ramesh points out that Trump, quote, has lost a foil. So, in 2016, obviously in 2024, he had these great foils in Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. And now the Democrats basically don't have a leader, and it's just Trump blotting out the sun. And we know that when Trump blots out the sun, the public tends to get pretty weary of it fast. So, yes, it's true, right? Trump is just objectively unpopular. He has always been consistently unpopular. And you have Piers Morgan and other MAGA curious, MAGA centrists, or I call it Diet MAGA or Closet MAGA, depending on who it is. But they're saying things like Trump's more popular than ever. He was at one point more popular than ever, but that's not saying much. He is still and has always been a historically unpopular president and presidential candidate. It's just true. President Biden left office pretty damn unpopular and spent much of his presidency pretty damn unpopular. I won't deny that, even though I think his domestic accomplishments vastly outstrip Trump's, and I would have preferred Biden to be president than Trump, and I still stand by that. But there's no denying that Biden was unpopular for most, at least much, if not most of his presidency. That's true. Trump is less popular than Biden. At least Biden got into the mid and upper 50s in approval rating. Trump never got that high. Never. And he's had the shortest presidential honeymoon in American history. That is why there's an entire Fox News segment admitting that Trump is in deep shit, quote, very bad shape. And again, I imagine that that's not going to make the friction between them go away. It's probably going to make it worse. And it may actually prompt even further retaliation from Donald Trump, who, again, is already publicly demanding that there be criminal investigation into Fox News because of a Fox News poll. That's the petty, powerful man that we're dealing with. Pretty scary for Fox, I imagine. In the meantime, let me know what you think in the comments.